You're not angry at them. You're angry at yourself for still thinking about them. That's the part nobody says out loud. Most people frame revenge as justice. It isn't. It never was. What you call justice is your ego trying to recover something it lost, and it will spend years trying to get it back. Years. Without ever telling you, that's what it's doing. Think about the last time someone genuinely humiliated you. Not hurt you, humiliated you, dismissed you, made you feel small in a room full of people, or alone, which is somehow worse. You replayed it, didn't you? Not once, not twice. You replayed it so many times you could direct it like a film. Every detail sharpened, every word remembered with surgical precision. The exact tone of their voice, the exact moment you felt the floor disappear beneath you, the exact expression on their face when they realized you weren't going to fight back. Here's what nobody tells you about that replay. Your brain isn't trying to torture you. It's trying to fix something. It keeps returning to the wound because reality gave you no resolution, no closure, no moment where the scales balanced and the universe acknowledged the injustice. So your mind builds one. It constructs a scene where you win, where they lose, where the world finally acknowledges what happened to you. And for a few seconds, it works. The tension drops, the chest loosens, the ego finds momentary relief, but then it wears off, and you go back, and this time you stay a little longer. This is where it gets uncomfortable. The revenge fantasy is not about them. It never was. It's about the version of you that got damaged in that moment. The self that was rejected and needed to believe it still had value. The pride that was stripped publicly and desperately needs restoration. The person who was made to feel powerless and cannot tolerate remaining that way. Revenge is a psychological reconstruction project, and the mind will work on it obsessively, tirelessly, invisibly, until something interrupts the process from the outside. Watch how these fantasies are actually structured. They almost always follow the same pattern. The person who hurt you suffers in some visible, undeniable way. They regret what they did, not in general, but to you specifically. They finally recognize your worth, the worth they ignored, dismissed, or openly denied, and you rise above them, either in their presence or in their awareness. You are calm. You are successful. You are everything they said you weren't. That's not justice. That's a wounded ego writing its own redemption arc and casting you as the hero it couldn't be in real life. Every element of the fantasy is designed to repair something internal, not to correct something external. And your brain rewards you for it. The imagined victory produces a real neurological response. The relief feels genuine because the emotional circuits don't distinguish between what happened and what you vividly imagined happening. So the brain learns. It learns that the fantasy produces relief, so it prescribes it again and again. And you start returning to the same mental movie compulsively. Not because you're weak, because your nervous system found a painkiller, and painkillers don't ask permission before becoming necessary. That's when something quietly catastrophic begins. The fantasy starts replacing real movement. Instead of building something new, you spend energy refining the imaginary victory. Instead of creating distance from the wound, you revisit it again and again to make the fantasy more detailed, more satisfying, more complete. Months pass, then years, and some people spend the better part of a decade winning elaborate cinematic battles inside their own minds while losing everything real that exists outside of them. The relationship they could have built, the work they could have done, the version of themselves they could have become if they had pointed all that obsessive energy forward instead of backward? All of it quietly sacrificed on the altar of a grudge that the other person doesn't even know exists anymore. Now comes the part that cuts deepest. Hatred creates attachment. This is not poetic language. This is structural truth. The more mental space someone occupies in your mind, the more psychological influence they hold over your daily experience. Every time you return to the fantasy, you are actively choosing to let them back inside. Every rehearsed confrontation, every imagined moment of their public downfall, every scenario where they finally understand the full weight of what they did, all of it requires their sustained presence inside your mind. You cannot fantasize about someone without maintaining your psychological connection to them, which means obsession is a hidden form of submission. You believe you are holding power over someone by hating them. You are actually granting them permanent residence in the most intimate space you possess. Your mind, your attention, your emotional hours, your nervous system. You are paying the rent with your own peace of mind so they can keep living inside you rent-free, indefinitely, without consequence. Some people take this further than fantasy. They quietly restructure their entire lives around the mission of proving someone wrong. Every achievement becomes a silent message directed at an audience of one, the person who doubted them, dismissed them, abandoned them. Every success measured not by what it genuinely means, but by whether it would devastate that specific person to witness. This presents itself as drive. It calls itself ambition, but look at it without flinching. Your direction in life is being set by someone you claim to despise. Your goals are organized around their perception of you. You have made your enemy your compass. That is not power. That is a leash you fashioned yourself and handed them the other end without them ever asking for it. And here is the reversal that tends to crack something open. They may not even remember you. The person who humiliated you in a meeting 5 years ago likely hasn't thought about it since that same week. The person who ended the relationship, who dismissed your value, who looked at you like you were replaceable and then proved it, they moved on. They are living inside a completely different story. Eating dinner, making plans, laughing at something that has nothing to do with you, while you have spent years inside yours, sharpening the wound, perfecting the fantasy, rehearsing the confrontation, carrying the full emotional weight of something they set down almost immediately. Yet they still shape your emotional state on random Tuesdays, not because they have power, because you gave it to them and never reclaimed it. The hardest question is the one people avoid with the most creativity. Is this anger actually helping you move, or has it just become familiar enough to feel like home? Because at some point, the anger stops being a response to what happened and becomes an identity. The betrayed person stays betrayed because releasing the story means releasing the self that was built around surviving it. The rejected person stays rejected because the rejection became the explanation for every closed door since. The humiliated person stays humiliated because the humiliation became the proof they carry, proof that the world is cruel, that people cannot be trusted, that they were wronged, and the world owes them acknowledgement of that fact. The story protects the ego from a more threatening question. What if, without it, I still don't know who I am or what I'm building? Here is a pattern few people are willing to sit inside for more than a second. Genuine power makes revenge less interesting. Not because powerful people are more forgiving or spiritually advanced. Because power shifts the fundamental orientation of the mind toward creation rather than retaliation. When you are genuinely building something, when life is moving in a direction that actually excites you, the old wound loses its grip. The fantasy becomes less satisfying because reality starts delivering something imagination could only simulate. It is weakness that keeps revenge compelling. When there is nothing forward-facing to move toward, the mind moves backward by default. It returns to the wound because the wound at least confirms that what happened mattered, that you mattered, that the loss was real, and therefore the pain was justified. The people who become genuinely difficult to offend are not the people with the thickest skin. They are the people who stopped building their identity on top of what others took from them. You cannot weaponize a loss against someone who has already let it go. You cannot humiliate someone whose sense of value no longer depends on your recognition of it. They simply don't have the wound available to press on anymore. And this is what finally dismantles the entire architecture. Most revenge fantasies are not actually about revenge. Underneath the image of watching someone suffer is a more vulnerable, more honest desire to be seen, to be understood, to finally be acknowledged as having mattered, to have someone say, "You were right. You were worth more than how I treated you. I was wrong, and I know it." The fantasy of their suffering is just the packaging around something far more fragile. The real desire is for the wound to be witnessed, for the loss to be validated by the person who caused it, for the story to end with someone finally confirming that what you endured was real and that you deserved better than what you received. That is not a dark impulse. That is one of the most human desires that exists. But the tragedy is that the one person whose acknowledgement is being sought is the person least equipped to provide it. Not because they won't, because they don't possess the interior depth to give you what you're asking for. You are seeking resolution from the exact source that created the wound, and that source cannot close what it opened. It never could. The moment someone no longer needs their enemy to lose in order to feel like they have won, the enemy loses everything. Not publicly, not dramatically, quietly, completely. The power dissolves not because anything changed in the world outside, but because the internal contract was canceled. The agreement that said their suffering is required for your healing, that agreement gets torn up. And suddenly, there is nothing left to wait for. That is the ending nobody fantasizes about, because it doesn't look like a victory. It doesn't feel like one either. It feels like releasing something you carried so long, it started to feel like it belonged to you. And letting go looks nothing like winning, until the moment you realize that needing to win was the prison the entire time. The bars weren't theirs. They were always yours. And you built them yourself, one replay at a time.